My name is Linda Parker. I'm 62 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been living in my daughter's house, helping raise her 2 kids after my husband passed away. I don't have hobbies like pottery or travel plans marked on a calendar. I had diapers to change, lunches to pack, and tiny socks to fold. That afternoon felt like any other. I had just taken a basket of clean baby clothes out of the dryer and was standing at the kitchen counter, cutting crusts off grilled cheese sandwiches the way Noah liked. Brianna sat at the island, scrolling through her phone, not really talking but not ignoring me either. Then, without looking up, she said it. "You're too old to babysit, Mom." It came out so flat, so effortless, like she was deciding between salad or soup. My hands froze, still holding the knife and a slice of apple. My chest tightened like something had cinched itself around my ribs. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I looked at Hermie daughter, the baby I once rocked through fevers and thunderstorms, the teenager I stayed up late helping with college applications, the woman I stood by through her divorce. She didn't meet my eyes. She just kept scrolling. She added, "It's nothing personal. Liam and I just think it's time for a shift." I nodded. That nod. That tiny practice smile that mothers like me wear when we're trying to swallow something bitter without choking on it. "Of course, I understand," I said, even though every part of me was screaming that I didn't. I walked back to the guest room. Not my room, not my house, just the space they let me use. I didn't slam the door or cry into a pillow. I just sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the baby monitor still plugged in on the nightstand. That monitor, with its soft green glow, used to make me feel needed. Now, it just felt like a leftover reminder of a role that no longer belonged to me. I realized something in that moment. I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was a placeholder, a piece of furniture that had been useful until it started creaking too loudly. She didn't mean to be cruel. That almost made it worse. It was so casual, so offhand, so easy for her to say. That sentence didn't just sting, it cracked something inside me. Not loud, not explosive, just a small, quiet fracture in a place I didn't even know could break. Looking back, I think that was the moment everything changed. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, trying to understand how love could turn into convenience without anyone noticing. After Alan died, the house felt too large. Every corner echoed with memories, and the silence was heavier than I knew how to carry. I sold it 6 months later and moved in with Brianna, thinking maybe being around the kids would help me feel like myself again. At first, it did. I woke up early every morning and tiptoed into the kitchen before anyone else stirred. I'd brew my coffee, vanilla bean with a splash of oat milk, and pack lunches, fold socks, and heat up oatmeal, just the way Noah liked it: cinnamon, blueberries, a little brown sugar stirred in while it was still warm. I had a rhythm again. I was needed. It wasn't the same kind of love Alan gave me, but it filled the spaces he left behind with something that felt steady. Ella would curl up in my lap after school, dragging her favorite blanket with her, and ask me to read her the same story 3 times in a row. I always said yes. Sometimes, after the kids went to bed, Brianna would stand in the doorway and smile. "You're a lifesaver, Mom. I don't know how I'd manage without you." I'd nod, my heart full, thinking maybe this was healing. Maybe love just looked different now. On weekends, we planted a little herb garden in pots by the porch. Ella kept pulling up the basil, thinking it was a weed, and I'd gently show her how to tell the difference. Noah would bring me dandelions like they were roses. I kept every one of them in a glass of water until they wilted. We had barbecue nights and blanket forts and popcorn on movie Fridays. I organized their closets, kept the fridge stocked, and made sure Ella always had extra socks in her backpack. It felt like home again. Not the one Alan and I built, but something close enough to hold on to. Looking back now, I realize I mistook comfort for connection. I thought I was becoming part of something again, rebuilding a life brick by brick through small moments. But I wasn't being loved. I was being useful. There's a difference between being needed and being valued, and I didn't know it yet. At the time, I thought we were all healing together. What I didn't see was that I was the only one doing the mending. The rest of them were just moving forward, and I was quietly filling in the spaces they didn't have time to manage. It started with little things. Brianna stopped asking for my opinion on the kids' schedules. Instead, she began leaving me printed instructions, taped neatly on the fridge like I was a substitute teacher instead of their grandmother. Then she stopped saying thank you. Not in a rude way, just in that quiet, casual way people do when they assume your help is a given. I'd fold laundry, prep dinner, pick up toys off the floor, and she'd walk right past me on the phone, nodding at nothing. I told myself it was stress. She had a demanding job, 2 young kids, a husband who traveled often. I didn't mind picking up the slack. That's what mothers do, right? You love by doing, and I was doing everything. But then came the moment that still sticks with me like a splinter. I was folding towels in the hallway, just outside the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I heard my name. Her voice was low, tired, the way people sound when they think they're being honest behind closed doors. She said she means well, but I think Mom's slipping. I froze. The towel in my hands went limp. My heart pounded in that strange, hollow way it does when something is breaking, and you can feel it but can't quite stop it. She kept talking, letting Ella nap too late again, reheating soup instead of making something fresh. Liam just hummed in agreement. No defense, no kindness, just that word. Slipping. Not loved, not cherished, just capable. And now, maybe not even that. My worth reduced to whether or not I could keep up. That night, I laid in bed staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the ways I'd tried to make their lives easier. The nights I stayed up with fevers, the early mornings with sticky pancakes, the quiet way I stepped out of the room when they needed space. None of it meant anything now. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't even a grandmother. I was help, and not the reliable kind anymore. It's strange, realizing you've become invisible to the people you love most, not because they stopped seeing you, but because they only ever saw what you could give. When the giving slowed, so did the appreciation. And when it stopped altogether, so did your place at the table. That word, capable, it echoed louder than any shout. It was the moment I knew something inside me had shifted. I was no longer trying to belong. I was trying not to break. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow unraveling, the kind you don't notice until the threads have already come loose. At first, it was little things subtle, forgettable moments that only start to sting when you realize they were part of a pattern. Brianna stopped forwarding me the kids' school calendars. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw the corkboard was gone, replaced by a sleek digital tablet mounted on the wall. When I asked if she could show me how to use it so I could keep track of Ella's art days or Noah's soccer practice, she didn't look up from her laptop. "It's okay, Mom. We've got it now." Just like that, I wasn't needed to remember anymore. The rhythms I used to keep in my head were now color-coded and locked behind a screen I wasn't invited to touch. I told myself it was convenience, not rejection. Then came Renee. I met her on a Wednesday morning when I walked into the living room and found her building a block tower with Ella. She looked up with a bright smile and said she was the new nanny. No one had told me. Brianna came downstairs a few minutes later, dressed for work. "Oh, I forgot to mention, this is Renee. She's helping out with the pickups and a few afternoons." I smiled, nodded, said it was nice to meet her. Inside, something in me folded in on itself. I offered to show Renee Ella's bedtime routine. Brianna waved me off. "She's a professional, Mom. Let her figure it out." Like I had somehow become outdated, a version 1 no longer compatible with the needs of a modern household. My mornings became quieter after that. No more pancake faces or sticky fingers tugging at my sleeve. No more story time before bed. I was still in the house, but I had been quietly written out of the script. The final blow came during one of Brianna's weekend brunches. These used to be my things: slicing fruit, arranging crackers, making sure the lemonade had the right number of ice cubes. I was in the kitchen, cutting strawberries, when Brianna walked in and said gently, "You don't have to do that, Mom. Renee's handling the food." I said I didn't mind, that I knew how picky Noah could be. She replied more firmly this time, "She's got it." I stepped back, not in anger, just in silence. I watched from the patio as Renee passed around juice boxes and gluten-free muffins. No one looked at me. No one asked where I was. I was there, and yet I wasn't. Even Noah looked confused that morning when I didn't take him to the park. "Why aren't you coming, Grandma?" I told him it was just a change of plans. But really, I hadn't been part of the plan in a while. Helping had become hovering. Familiar had become replaceable. I wasn't part of the rhythm anymore. I was a shadow, quietly moving around the edges of a life I thought I still belonged to. It's a strange thing, living in a house filled with people and still feeling completely alone. I wasn't excluded in any obvious way. It was quieter than that, more like being slowly erased. They stopped telling me their plans. I'd find out about dentist appointments or school field trips only after they had already happened. The calendar no longer included me. There were no more quick texts asking if I could pick up Ella or stay home with Noah. My phone stayed quiet. At dinner, I'd set the table out of habit. 4 plates, 4 napkins, 4 glasses. One evening, just as I was laying the last fork down, Brianna breezed into the kitchen, grabbing her purse and saying they were heading out to eat. Renee was joining them. She didn't say I couldn't come. She just didn't include me. I sat at that table for a long time after the door closed. The plates stayed full, the napkins stayed folded. I wasn't angry, I just felt misplaced. Even the kids began adjusting. Noah used to wake up and run straight to my room, dragging his blanket like a cape. Lately, he went straight to Renee. When he asked why I wasn't going to the park anymore, I didn't know what to say. Just a change of plans, sweetheart. That was easier than saying the truth. The worst part wasn't being pushed out, it was realizing no one noticed. No one missed the pancakes or the bedtime stories or the quiet way I kept their world stitched together. The space I once filled had closed behind me without a sound. One Saturday morning, I looked around the living room and saw none of it was mine. Not the couch, not the toys, not the energy. I had folded laundry, stocked the pantry, watered the plants, and none of it mattered. I was a ghost, quietly drifting through someone else's life. I started packing that night. Just a few boxes. Nothing dramatic. No announcement. No confrontation. I left a note on the nightstand that simply said, "Thank you for letting me stay." I moved out 3 days later. Brianna didn't ask where I was going. There were no hugs, no packed snacks for the road, not even a ride to the door. Just a message a few hours later that read, "Hope you settle in okay. I'll call you soon." She never did. And for the first time in my life, I didn't wait. The apartment I found was small, just one bedroom tucked above an old laundromat. The stairs creaked, and the air always smelled faintly of detergent and warm metal. It wasn't home, but it was mine. The first few weeks were quiet in a way I wasn't used to. I'd get up early out of habit, make coffee, and sit at the window watching people come and go without ever looking up. I walked to the grocery store even when I didn't need anything, just to feel like I was part of the world again. No one noticed me there. No smiles, no small talk. Once, a man reached past me for a can of soup and didn't say, "Excuse me." I remember thinking, so this is what it means to disappear without dying. At night, I'd sit on the edge of the bed and stare at unopened boxes stacked against the wall. I couldn't bring myself to unpack them. Each one felt like a reminder of something that used to be important. I didn't know where I fit anymore. Not in their lives, not even in my own. One rainy afternoon, I finally opened the last box. It was marked Alan in faded marker, and I had been avoiding it for weeks. Inside were anniversary cards, dried flowers from our 30th dinner, and a few photos from a trip we took to Montana. I held one of them to my chest and let the silence fill the room. At the bottom of the box was a small envelope. I had written on it in my own handwriting, "Check later." Inside was a crumpled lottery ticket. I almost laughed. Alan used to buy them every month, not because he expected to win, but because he liked to dream. "Just imagine," he'd say, "Tuscany, or at least a dishwasher that doesn't leak." I pulled out my phone and searched the numbers. The ticket was old but not expired. I read the Powerball results for that date twice, then a third time, out loud. Every number matched. I sat there in the quiet, staring at that ticket like it might catch fire in my hands. For a long time I didn't move. I couldn't. The air around me shifted, like something invisible had leaned in close and whispered, "You're not finished." I didn't scream or jump. I didn't call anyone. I just let it wash over me. Not joy, not shock. It felt like recognition, as if the world had finally seen me again after pretending I wasn't there. The money mattered, of course, but what it gave me, what really mattered, was choice. For the first time in years, I had options. Not because someone else needed me, but because I still had a life of my own to live. A story I hadn't finished telling. I booked the flight without telling anyone. One-way ticket to Florence, middle seat, no expectations. I arrived on a Tuesday morning, dragging a carry-on, and a quiet kind of hope I hadn't felt in years. My apartment was on the second floor of a stone building wrapped in ivy. The windows overlooked a narrow street where the scent of espresso and fresh bread drifted up every morning. It was small and uneven and nothing like what I had imagined my life would be, but it felt right. I spent my days walking through markets, learning to ask for fruit in broken Italian, and sketching in piazzas like I had done when I was younger. No one here knew who I used to be. No one asked me what I did or who I was to someone else. I was just a woman with a notebook and time. With the money secured, I met with a lawyer. We rewrote my will. I left everything to my grandchildren with 3 clear conditions: finish school, prove financial independence, and perform 1 verified act of kindness for someone they don't know. I didn't do it to punish Brianna. I did it because I finally understood something that had taken me a lifetime to learn. Love without respect is not love. Usefulness is not value. Silence is not peace. I removed her name not out of anger, but clarity. She had her own path now, one that no longer required me, and I had mine, which no longer included waiting to be chosen by someone who had already walked away. In the quiet of my new life, I found something I hadn't even known I lost. My voice. Not the loud kind. Just the steady one that says, I know who I am, and that is enough. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Not to hurt, but to protect what was left of me. The pieces that still believed in soft mornings, handwritten letters, and the kind of legacy that teaches compassion, not entitlement. I walked home that night with a loaf of bread in my bag and paint on my hands. The streets glowed gold under the sunset, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking toward it. The first message came 2 months after I left. It was short, just 3 words. You doing okay? I didn't respond. A week later came a voicemail. She said the kids missed me. That maybe we could do a video call. I let it go unanswered. I wasn't angry, I just wasn't available. Then came the message I had expected. We need to talk about your estate. Not how are you, not I miss you, just the estate. I called Mr. Granger, my lawyer in Boston. I told him to expect contact. He said he already had. A formal inquiry had been submitted from Brianna's attorney. They were requesting information about the trust, citing concern over my cognitive state. I had prepared for this. Months earlier, Celeste, my financial advisor, helped me document every meeting. We had recordings, transcripts, and signed statements detailing each decision. I also had a full psychological evaluation on file. Clean, clinical, undeniable. We sent everything in one single packet. No cover letter, no emotional commentary, just facts. A week later, the response came back from the bank. The trust stands. Any attempt to override it would be considered fraudulent. Then came the twist. Mr. Granger received an email, one that wasn't meant for us. It was from Brianna's lawyer to their internal team. One line stood out. Client is stunned. Expected to intimidate. Did not anticipate such thorough preparation. I read that line twice. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just breathed, deep and steady, like someone who finally stood on solid ground after years of drifting. I didn't call Brianna. I didn't respond to the new round of messages that followed. I didn't need to defend myself. I had already done the work. And now the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. It was mine. The envelope arrived in the morning, slid gently under my door with no return address. My name was written in large, uneven letters, the kind only a child can make. Inside was a crayon drawing of a red house, a yellow sun, and 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, and one with long silver hair. At the top, in bold blue strokes, were the words, "We miss you, Grandma." My breath caught before I even finished unfolding it. On the back was a note in more careful handwriting. "I didn't tell them why you left. I just said you were on a big adventure. They ask about you every week." I read it twice, then again. It didn't have an apology. It didn't need one. It was an offering, and that was enough. That evening I pulled out the letters I had written but never mailed. Notes filled with bedtime stories, inside jokes, and memories of pancake mornings and backyard picnics. I tucked 2 pressed flower petals from my garden inside and added a new message. "Dear Noah and Ella, I got your drawing. I especially loved the silver hair. Very accurate. Tell Ella I still remember her story about the rabbit with yellow boots. One day I'll read her the Italian version. Be good, be kind, and always know your grandma loves you more than all the stars. Love, Grandma Linda." A week later, another letter arrived. This time from Brianna. She said she read the note I sent to the kids, that she knew she had made mistakes, that she wasn't asking for anything, just hoping one day she could see me again. Not as a daughter seeking forgiveness, but as a woman finally seeing her mother for who she truly was. I didn't cry. I didn't need her words to prove anything. Still, something in her tone had shifted. It wasn't polished. It wasn't defensive. It was human. 2 days later, I sent back one single line. "You may come as my guest, bring only kindness, leave expectations behind. I didn't open the door wide, but I left it unlocked. Not for reconciliation, but for respect. The sun was just beginning to warm the rooftops of Florence when I sat down at my favorite cafe. The waiter already knew my order: 1 espresso, no sugar, and a small glass of water on the side. I opened my notebook and looked out over the piazza, watching the quiet rhythm of the morning unfold. There was no need to rush, no one waiting on me, no one measuring my worth in chores or childcare or calendar reminders. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I was simply living. I had spent so many years pouring myself into others, into being useful, into being acceptable. And when that version of me was no longer needed, I was discarded without hesitation. But here, now, I had finally remembered what it meant to belong to myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I had no interest in revenge or recognition. What I had built was not a comeback. It was a reclamation. A life rooted not in being chosen, but in choosing. Florence gave me space to breathe, to feel sunlight on my skin without guilt, to paint without asking permission, to say no without explanation, to sip coffee and not apologize for being still. I thought healing would be loud, that it would look like standing up and shouting. But mine was soft, steady, like a page slowly turning, like a door closing without a sound. If you're listening to this and it feels familiar, if you've ever felt invisible or used or quietly forgotten, let me tell you something. You are not broken. You are not past your worth. Sometimes the world doesn't need to see you again. You just need to see yourself. And when you do, really do, there is a peace that no one can take away. Not even those who once called you family. Not even the silence they left behind. My name is Linda Parker. I am 63. I live in a second-floor apartment in a city that speaks to me in the language of light and kindness. And for the first time in a very long time, I am exactly where I'm meant to be. If this story meant something to you, maybe take a moment and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're still waiting to be chosen, I hope you know this. You don't have to wait. You can choose yourself, just like I did.